Welcome to Week 3, Chapter 5. This week, Week 3 has 3 chapters, Chapter 5, 6, and 7. We're going to start with Chapter 5 and then, of course, progress to Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. So let's get started with Chapter 5. In Chapter 5, we're looking at the ground rules of metabolism. Metabolism is the sum of all chemical and physical reactions that occur inside of a living organism. And it basically has 2 branches, catabolism, which is in essence digestion, breaking complex into simple, and anabolism, building up, taking simple and building to more complex. And we discussed some of this last week when we were looking at the macromolecules, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. With Chapter 5, Week 3, starting with this slide, we can see that for our molecules to cycle through living organisms, we first have to get an input of external energy. And of course, that comes from the sun. So the energy of the sun in little packets called photons is used by producers to fix carbon from carbon dioxide, making our macromolecules, our basically complex carbon molecules. Those are used by the producers, the plants. They're consumed by organisms such as us or other animals or fungi or bacteria. And then when those organisms die, their bodies are decomposed and the nutrients are in essence recycled. Now, of course, we lose some energy from this process in heat, but obviously enough energy is captured for us to support life. So the main source of energy is the sun. That energy is captured by photosynthetic organisms such as plants through the process of photosynthesis. And plants as well as other organisms then undergo aerobic cellular respiration to produce energy from the carbon-based substances produced by plants. So in essence, all molecules of life are built upon chemical reactions. And this is a slide to show a basic chemical reaction. What we see right now are reactants, and we have 2 H2O, which is in essence 4 hydrogen atoms, an O2 molecule, diatomic, 2 oxygen atoms, and they react to form water, 2 molecules of water. So to the left, we have our reactants, and to the right of the arrow, we have our products. So as we go through and look at some more complicated chemical pathways, metabolic pathways in living organisms, try and keep this in mind. To the left of the arrow are reactants, and to the right of the arrow are products. So when a chemical reaction occurs, energy has to be put into the chemical reaction. So this is an energy profile of a reaction. And we can see along the x-axis time. So at this starting point is 0 time, and as we move to the right, the reaction is proceeding. On the y-axis, we have the amount of energy or free energy, which is basically energy that is available to do work. So our reactants, 2 H2s and an O2, which are our reactants, possess a set amount of free energy. When we want, or when the cell or just the chemical reaction in general needs to make product from this, notice the products sit at a lower free energy than the reactants. So here we have our 2 molecules of water, and their amount of free energy is less than the free energy of the reactants. So that means that the energy of the products is less than the energy of the reactants. So this type of chemical reaction would give off energy and usually also give off heat. This hill that we see in the reaction, all reactions have. And this is the activation energy, which is the amount of energy that you have to put into your reactants to get the process going so that we can form products. Kind of think of it as having a ball at the top of a slide, and you have to push the ball even a little bit to get it to fall down the slide. So you pushing the ball was in essence getting the energy of the ball over that hump or that activation energy. Now in cells, what gets our reactants over the hump or the activation energy are enzymes. In a chemistry lab, we heat, we stir, we agitate, and that provides our activation energy. An energy molecule of cells is adenosine triphosphate. And this is what adenosine triphosphate looks like. It's made up of a 5-carbon sugar ribose, which we can see right here. It's made up of a nitrogenous base adenine, and then 3 phosphate groups. ATP is our energy currency because it is capable of delivering energy to other molecules. And as it does that, it loses phosphate groups. So if we go from triphosphate, 3 phosphates, to losing 1 and only having 2, we're ADP, or adenosine diphosphate, to losing another one, we're AMP, adenosine monophosphate. And like I said, ATP is the energy currency of the cell. So as the cell produces ATP, it stores energy. So we can see energy in, forming our energy currency of the cell, ATP. And then when we need energy, we take ATP and hydrolyze it, break it down by hydrolysis into ADP and phosphate, and we liberate energy. So it's kind of like our dollar bills. This is our energy currency of the cell. It's the way that we can get reactions to occur because those reactions need energy to form products. So one of the major substances that cells need to assist a chemical reaction in occurring is an enzyme, because an enzyme lowers the energy of activation, or that hump of energy needed to be put into products, or excuse me, that hump of energy needed to be put into reactants to form products. And all enzymes have a spot on them called an active site. And the active site is where the substrate, which is the reactant, is going to bind. So to the right, we can see a simple circle. That is our enzyme. This green is our enzyme, and the square is our active site. To the left, we see this large brown structure. That's our enzyme. And right in here is the pocket or groove where the substrate or the reactants are going to fit. That is our active site. Here's a close-up showing our reactant or substrate. In this case, it's glucose and phosphate inside the enzyme's active site. And in essence, what this active site does is it sets up a little microenvironment which lowers the energy of activation for product formation. So it favors the reaction between, in this case, the glucose and the phosphate. And then we get product formation. And in this example, the product is glucose being bound with the phosphate. So we get glucose bound with a phosphate on 6th carbon. So glucose's 6th carbon now has a phosphate group, so it's called glucose 6-phosphate. And once it's formed, it leaves the active site or the pocket or the groove. And when it leaves the active site, now the enzyme is able to go and do its job again. So an enzyme's not damaged or used up by a chemical reaction. Just to review, the reactants are the substrates. The active site is the pocket or the groove in which the substrate will fit. That sets up or establishes a microenvironment to promote product formation by lowering the energy of activation. The energy of activation is the amount of energy needed to put into the reaction to get it to go to form products. And of course, the enzyme is the structure that is the catalyst inside of a cell. And typically, enzymes are composed of protein. So here we see how the energy of activation has been lowered with the enzyme. So here before, use of the enzyme is the amount of energy needed to be put into the reactants to form product. Now that we have the enzyme, we don't have to put as much energy in to form our product. So our energy of activation has been lowered with our catalyst or our enzyme.